Russian President Vladimir Putin appears to have shrugged off demands for an immediate unconditional ceasefire starting tomorrow. European leaders and the U.S. are trying to put pressure on Putin to agree to the month-long ceasefire. And the hopes, of course, is to bring an end to this 3-year-long war. Yesterday, Putin proposed direct negotiations, but he wants them done in Istanbul. And on Thursday, he made no mention of the ceasefire. Responding to Putin's speech, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it's a positive sign that Russians have finally begun to consider ending the war and that Kyiv is ready for direct talks with Russia. CNN's
no. Let me read it.
He's following the latest. Has Seb Shukla finally begun to...
Okay, it is a positive sign that the Russians have finally begun to consider ending the war. The entire world has been waiting for this for a very long time. And the very first step in truly ending any war is a ceasefire. There is no point in continuing the killing even for a single day. We expect Russia to confirm a ceasefire full, lasting and reliable starting tomorrow, May 12th, and Ukraine is ready to meet. So again, he's giving out conditions again that there's going to be ceasefire before they meet. Oh man, it's like, I'm sorry, you're on the losing side. You should be glad for any negotiations you can get. And that's what I was saying. Like, I understand that President Zelensky is emotional about what's going on. He should be as a leader, right? But once you go into the negotiation, you need to leave that behind the door because it's about business. You need to realize what's best for the future of your people. Not hold any grudges about what happened, however horrible it was, but you're trying to protect people from dying. So don't be like, well, we want justice. Yes, everyone wants justice. But the most important thing is that you protect the future generations. Like, you already wiped out at least 2 generations of Ukrainians. I think there was what's the average age of Ukrainians right now, and it's somewhere around 40 years. So that means people from 20 to 40 are significantly wiped out of Ukraine. Either they ran away or died on the battlefield. Like, really, you need to leave the emotions aside and negotiate to end this freaking war.
To consider ending the war and that Kyiv is ready for direct talks with Russia. CNN's has Seb Shukla. He's following the latest in London. And we're going to start, though, with Nick Payton-Walsh. He is in Kyiv. And Nick, just a moment ago, my producer told me that, you were kind of out of the camera lens because there is a threat that's happening now that's in direct context of this ceasefire discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon here for there to be air raid sirens. We had some early this morning. We've had some in the last 10 minutes. This, though, specifically the Ukrainian Air Force warning of a ballistic missile threat to the capital, Kiev here. As I say, not uncommon. Every night, Ukraine, with the exception of a couple of nights during Russia's unilaterally declared ceasefire in which they continue frontline fighting, every night Ukraine is hit by Russian attack drones and often ballistic missiles too. So that's just some context, though, for this discussion of diplomacy, which at times can feel very ethereal and detached from the gritty reality here of missiles being fired often at civilian areas. So where we are today is a European demand with Ukraine and with US backing for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire has not been accepted at this point by Russian President Vladimir Putin. And indeed, in very late night comments early this morning, he talked about how Ukraine hadn't honoured previous ceasefires. Ukraine says Russia has indeed. There's evidence, frankly, that these have been very rocky when they've been declared unilaterally, certainly in terms of Moscow's adherence to them. He talked too about the need for direct negotiations between Ukraine and Russia and gave a date for that, Istanbul, on Thursday. Now, none of that is new. There have been talks between some parties in Istanbul in the past. and indeed to the idea of direct talks between the two countries has been agreed to in different types of wording by both Kiev and Moscow. So what Putin, I think, is suggesting is another diplomatic phase here in a country and a capital, in Istanbul, a city where indeed we've seen diplomacy before. But we've heard from the French President Emmanuel Macron, who did a lot of the lifting to get us to this point of the demand for a ceasefire, speaking to President Trump in the past days many times indeed. He called this, suggested this was another delaying tactic. He said in a tweet and a post on social media that there must be a ceasefire first, that you can't have negotiations while civilians are indeed being shelled by Russian bombs. And so
shouldn't you be happy for any negotiations? Like, obviously, signing the ceasefire deal would be big, would help protect a lot of lives. But if they don't sign it, like, what, you're just not going to negotiate? Like, it's ridiculous. It's been going on for 3 years. Again, it should have never take so long. Like, the European countries, US under Biden, everyone should have been like, yes, we're going to support you as long as you try to negotiate about the peace. That's what they should have said to Ukraine. Like, there should have been conditions for that support. Like, the war should have been done in 2 weeks. But no. Somehow the whole world funded this war, and now we're here. And we keep hearing this BS again. Oh, if you don't agree with this deal, we're not going to negotiate with you. Yes, obviously, it's going to be hard to negotiate with someone who's at the same time killing the civilians. But what other choice you have? Like, really? You want to wait another month or so? While I think they said 5,000 people a day is dying. So, really? You really want to sacrifice that many people only because of, I don't know, is it ego or is it some pseudo justice? Like, you're never gonna get justice. Leave the emotions out of the way. Protect the future of your country, and not this. Like, it's not about ego in this case.
It appears the European demand remains the same. That's been echoed by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, that ceasefire first, then talks. What we don't know yet is if, indeed, the White House, President Trump putting a very positive post out after Putin's comments last night, we don't know if that is in fact going to result in the massive sanctions that French President Emmanuel Macron talked about yesterday as being the consequence if Russia doesn't sign up to the ceasefire.
What are we talking about sanctions again? What was going on this past 3 years? And how did it affect Russia? Didn't help at all. You think another sanctions are going to change something? Question, if you have more, why didn't you already bring it up? But yeah, regarding the meeting, I saw another video from Newsmax that there's a chance that President Zelensky, President Trump, and President Putin will all meet in Turkey. I just have one question about it. Is there still an international warrant for President Putin? Is the Turkey gonna arrest President Putin, or are they gonna ignore it? I mean, obviously, if President Trump's gonna be there and he wants to negotiate, right, President Zelensky, it would be kind of counterproductive to arrest President Putin, but at the same time, like, why do we have this law? And just pardon me, I'm a little bit uneducated on that. I'm not sure if Turkey has to obey this international warrant or no, but it's something that's kind of interesting to me.
Ceasefire. He said he had American backing for that. Donald Trump said he continued to work with Ukraine and Russia to be sure this process moved forwards. We don't know the timing of when those potential consequences might kick in, or indeed if they'll have the same kind of hard backing that the Europeans suggested they would in that remarkable meeting yesterday in Kiev.
Nick Payton-Walls for us there in Kiev. Thanks so much. Let's go now to CNN's Sebastian Shukla in London. Sebastian, the consequences, as Nick laid out, we don't know yet. What is clear is that this is not going to satisfy Europe after they set that ultimatum, that demand just yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's right. What the Kremlin and President Putin are trying to do here is move the ball back into the Western Europe's court here and say, look, okay, you guys are prepared to put an ultimatum on us of this ceasefire, which needs to begin on Monday. But what President Putin is doing is saying, okay, I raise your 30-day ceasefire ultimatum on Monday. I'm going to say, let's have direct talks between Kyiv and Moscow, which is something, as Nick was saying, is not new, but certainly haven't happened since the early days of the invasion in February 2022. So this is President Putin again.
That's what I was talking about. Why? Why didn't it happen since the early days of the war? Like, really? Did you bamboozle the Ukraine into thinking that they can win against Russia? Like, it's ridiculous. It's not about money. If you think about it, it's just, even if it's only about the manpower, like the size of Russia and size of Ukraine, you really think Ukrainians have a chance to win? Even with the funding from the whole world? Unless you send the army there, they're not gonna win. And if you send the army, we have a third world war. Like, it should have been dealt with in the first 2 weeks. Either negotiate a peace or send the army straight away when they invaded. You could have avoided the World War III. Or if you negotiate it, nothing would be happening like it is right now, right? Ukraine would probably have to give out some land, but not as much as right now, because look how much Russia's controlling. And you think they're gonna give it up? They won't. But anyway, it's ridiculous that they didn't negotiate for almost 3 years, while the whole world was blindly just sending money.
Again, trying to pull the rug and fool and trick the West into thinking that he is making and serious about peace and ending the war in Ukraine. And there may be some substance to that. Don't forget that the administration led by Donald Trump has kowtowed to Moscow in many ways. You know, it sidelined Ukraine, it's sidelined its European partners and held direct talks with Moscow. But then that rhetoric changed again, where we saw...
Here we go, the CNN bias against Donald Trump. So let's set the thing straight. President Donald Trump is the first person in those 3 years who actually cares about the peace and tries to negotiate it. So blame everyone else, but not him. He's not the one who let it go for 3 years. While, again, everyone was just blindly funding this war. Like, ridiculous, CNN.
Senator Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, come out and say, well, look, we're losing patience and the administration may be being strung on a little by the Kremlin. And so this may be yet another ploy by Moscow to be able to say, look, no, we're serious about negotiations. But within all of this, the context and framework is so important. You can say you want to have the discussions, but so far, President Zelensky and nobody else has ruled out attending them.
Seb Shukla for us in London. Thanks so much. Do you think that this offer from President Putin, attempting to skip by this request or this demand for a 30-day ceasefire and go straight to talks in Istanbul on Thursday, will be enough to peel off President Trump, who wants a quick finish, who wants a win, from what we saw from him yesterday, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and the rest of Europe?
I think it's designed to do that. Trump wants quick action, and Russia is showing that it is on the side of peace. And I think Zelensky's response is also designed to appease Trump, to say, look, I'm not the one standing in the way of peace. The Europeans, I think, are taking the more realistic view. We've heard from President Macron of France saying this is Russia just buying time. I think that's the more accurate description of it. But both Moscow and Kyiv are signaling towards Washington, not towards the Europeans.
Bobby Ghosh, always good to have you. Thank you.
Anytime.
If I'm president, I will have that war settled in 1 day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in 1 day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with...
Of course CNN had to play it, right? Oh my God.
Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled.
I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine totally settled. I'll have it done in 24 hours.
So it's been more than 24 hours since the president became president
Oh
again.
my God.
Putin did say overnight that he's open to direct talks unconditional talks with Ukraine, but Zelensky says there must be a ceasefire first. Over the weekend, the U.S. and European leaders threatened sanctions against Russia if they did not agree to the ceasefire. What do you make of the way that Trump has been handling this situation so far?
You heard it in that clip, and you heard it from this report, from reporting Olivia was talking about. He's very relational, and he's a nationalist. He has very good relationships with people like Modi, with Putin, quite frankly, and they have their own interests. Modi has his own interests, his own popularity base in India because because of Hindu nationalism, because of the way he's run that country. It turns out when America pulls back a bit from the world and encourages nationalist impulses, nationalist leaders, Modi, who's seen even by some in India as a strongman, they don't always act in America's best interests. Russia's not acting in America's interest. Russia's acting in its own. Ukraine and Europe have less faith in the administration actually the United States as a broker than they did. They're looking more towards each country's individual interest. And I think you're starting to see the very beginnings of what that means. If the United States is not swooping in with a deal, if it's dealing with these countries as they are, with their own intent, with what's best for their polities, they're going to get a different deal. You saw in India, one story that came out of this was Chinese Chengdu plane. A plane that China was manufacturing performed very well. A reminder that there is a vast power much closer to India with much more history there that has its own influence growing in the region because America's pulling out. So there are a lot of complications that are harder than getting a deal one day because you're friends with the president or the prime minister.
Oh, that was ridiculous again. So I love how they make everything fault of US only because President Trump got elected, right? So if US helps, it's wrong. If US pulls out, it's wrong. It's just ridiculous. Like I said, it should have never happened. The war should not have gone for 3 years, unfortunately. And that's not just US fault, right? Like, yes, President Biden, people were looking up to him, but you have European Union who was supporting Ukraine. You have Americans who were supporting Ukraine. And again, don't get me wrong, obviously we should support Ukraine. But it shouldn't be blindly just sending them money and not putting any conditions on it. Like, yes, we're gonna support you as long as you're trying, at least trying to negotiate about a peace. And again, saying that if you don't sign the ceasefire deal, we're not going to negotiate with you, that's ridiculous, especially when losing side is saying it. And you can argue on me who's losing side, who's not, but again, look at the manpower. Like, who's going to win? Even if you support, even if you keep sending money, like it's not going to change much. And yes, it might be harder to negotiate if the ceasefire deal is not active, if your people are dying every day. But what other option do you have? You want to wait another week, 2 weeks, months until Russia decides to sign ceasefire and then you're going to negotiate? Or you're going to negotiate through the active war, trying to get the deal done? And you might get the deal in a week, 2 weeks. So you're gonna your priority should not be emotions, or justice, however bad it sounds. Like, your priority should be to protect the future of your people, of the citizens of Ukraine, of your country itself. Like, if you have opportunity to negotiate. Don't start with some silly conditions again. It's that's just my opinion. You can disagree with it, but like, this war was going on for 3 years and no one accomplished anything other than crazy amount of people dying for what? Because they didn't want to sign the deal in 2 weeks.